Hey guys, tonight we drift back to an age when flirtation had a scent, paper carried desire, and a single dab of violet water could cause quite the stir. You're seated at a writing desk, mahogany, polished to a sleepy gleam. A lace curtain flutters in the warm evening breeze. Outside, horses clop by. Inside, your fingers hover over ivory stationery, your favorite lilac-scented cologne uncorked nearby. You're not just writing a letter, you're crafting a scented wink. This is Victorian England, and believe it or not, you're about to flirt through the mail. Now, this isn't modern-day texting where a winky emoji does the heavy lifting. Oh no, back then, every loop of the cursive, every pressed flower, every trace of scent whispered messages that words alone couldn't say, especially for women who weren't technically allowed to say much of anything flirtatious aloud. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments, where are you watching from, and what time is it for you right now? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You walk the cobblestone streets of late 19th century London, dodging a puddle here, sidestepping a chimney sweep there. The city smells of coal smoke, horse dung, and roast chestnuts. But inside a lady's drawing room, the air is heavy with roses, violet, and the subtle powdery trace of heliotrope. This is the atmosphere in which the scented postcard thrives. You pick one up from a writing desk. It's pale pink with scalloped edges, embossed with golden filigree. It smells like, is that orange blossom? The fragrance is faint now, but it lingers. The perfume has been absorbed into the paper fibers, a delicate ghost of the sender's intentions. This isn't just a letter. It's an emotional grenade, sugar-coated in etiquette. The idea of using scent as communication wasn't new. You might recall how ancient Egyptians doused their wigs with myrrh or how Roman women perfumed their letters with saffron. But Victorians? They systematized it, industrialized it, and added lace, because of course they did. You slide your thumb along the edge of the card. The sender knew exactly what they were doing. A spritz of attar of roses told a gentleman, I find you charming, and yes, I've read Byron. A trace of jasmine? A bit bolder. You intrigue me, and I'm not asleep at these dinner parties. But sandalwood? That's playing with fire. Scent was never just scent, it was implication in a bottle. And these implications fluttered around Victorian society with surprising subtlety. Remember, this was a time when showing your ankle was borderline scandalous. Women weren't supposed to speak plainly of desire or attraction. But perfume? That was their loophole. One dab and boom, coded communication. A sensory Morse code. Let's say you're a young woman in 1875, perched on your tufted fainting couch. You're crafting a reply to a gentleman who danced with you at last Thursday's ball. You're not allowed to call him. You're certainly not going to just walk to his home. But you can write him a thank you note, sealed with your signature scent. He'll open the envelope and wait. Was that a whiff of bergamot? His heart stutters. That was your scent from the ball. The one that clung to your gloves. Historians still argue whether these fragrances were meant as conscious seduction or merely a personal flourish. But come on, you know exactly what you're doing. Postal workers knew too. Oh yes, some even reported that certain letters arrived, fragrantly suggestive. A few cheeky postmen confessed to recognizing local women by the perfume they used. No addresses needed. Imagine the water cooler gossip at the post office. Ah, another jasmine envelope from Miss Thornberry. Must be for that red-haired barrister again. Of course, not everyone was thrilled. Some moralists warned that scented letters stirred up unwholesome imagination, especially if the sender wasn't married, because nothing's more dangerous than the fantasy of a woman who smells like violets. Even manufacturers joined in the fun. By the 1880s, perfume companies marketed letter-friendly scents designed to last in envelopes. Some even included miniature corked vials shaped like roses or hearts for ladies to keep in their reticules, ready for correspondence emergencies. Still, don't think this was all demure romance. Sometimes the scent was the message and the weapon. A rival in society might send a faintly musk-scented note, scandalous, to suggest your morals were flexible. Or a letter deliberately lacking scent might signal disdain. A kind of olfactory cold shoulder. You shift on the chaise, feeling the plush velvet against your arm. The air feels heavier now, heady with the imagined perfume. Your eyelids droop a little, lulled by the swirl of past flirtations and forgotten letters. One mainstream fact: Victorian women often layered perfume directly into the papers weave using a technique involving alcohol and flower distillates. It wasn't just spritz and pray. They were crafting wearable, smellable poetry. One quirky tidbit: some ambitious ladies even pressed actual flower petals between the pages, leading to a wave of botanical stains that confounded historians for decades. The faint outline of a rose wasn't always a keepsake. It might have just been a slightly aggressive flirt. And remember, historians still argue whether these practices were a widespread cultural trend or limited to urban elites with access to finer goods. The rural girl with a cow in the yard probably wasn't mailing violet-scented sonnets to the next village. Or maybe she was. Either way, the era of scented flirtation has begun. And you're holding a card that smells like promise, like memory, like rebellion hidden in wax-sealed politeness. The lights flicker. Somewhere in your mind, you hear the rustle of a crinoline skirt. Was that a whisper of heliotrope in the air, or just your imagination? You lean in just a little, nose nearly brushing the delicate cardstock in your hand. It's faint now, but still there. A whisper of scent. Not too sweet, not too sharp. If you had to name it, you'd say violets with a shy undercurrent of bergamot. You're not a perfumer, but your instincts say this note wasn't an accident. She chose it for a reason, and now you're decoding it. In the Victorian world, perfume was not just pleasant. It was a language of implication, subtlety, and strategy, especially for women who had 1,000 rules about what they could say in public, but hardly any about what they could imply through fragrance. So you're about to step into a world where perfume meant power. Welcome to the language of flowers. Only now, it's wafting out of envelopes. The Victorians were obsessed with floral symbolism. Entire books were published, little scented dictionaries of meaning. A red rose? Obvious. Love. But a yellow carnation? Rejection. Gardenia? Secret crush. If you were lucky enough to get a sprig of heliotrope, it meant eternal devotion. But too much lily? Oof. Grief, or worse, guilt. Now imagine taking that already dramatic language and giving it literal scent. You send someone a pressed pansy with a spritz of vanilla, and boom, your emotions are now airborne. You run a finger along the edge of the postcard again, half listening to the tick of a nearby mantel clock. It's so easy to imagine a young woman sitting precisely where you are now, fidgeting nervously over her bottle of lavender water, wondering if a gentleman would understand. Would he decode the scent as tenderness? Or think she was just into gardening? Historians still argue whether the average Victorian man was truly fluent in the language of flowers, or just nodded along politely while women took it very seriously. Honestly, you're leaning toward the latter. But women, oh, they knew, and they used it skillfully. Picture her, seated by a window in a modest parlor, lace curtains puffing gently, pen poised above an envelope. She dabs a drop of scent beneath her collarbone, then carefully blots another into the paper with the corner of a linen handkerchief. Her mother once warned her never to overdo it. It was one thing to flirt, quite another to reek. You lean back and take it all in. The entire sensory experience was part of the strategy. The handwriting slightly slanted, curlicued. The paper, thick, creamy, sometimes lightly tinted with pastel dye. The seal, pressed with a tiny heart or a discreet floral emblem. And then the perfume, always last, always deliberate. Want to say, I'm thinking of you? Go with jasmine. Feeling bold? Try patchouli. Want to hint that a rival's breath smells like last week's pudding? Send a rose card to her suitor and let the scent do the talking. This wasn't just for courtship either. Some families used specific scents to brand their household correspondence. Imagine a family crest, but olfactory. The Farnsworths of Kent, for instance, were known for their use of geranium oil, something local merchants claimed they could identify blindfolded. There's one quirky example that sticks with you. Lady Maud Everleigh, notorious for her flirtatiousness, was rumored to switch scents mid-courtship to throw men off. One day sandalwood, the next day honeysuckle. "I never knew who I was in love with," a confused suitor allegedly wrote in his journal. Poor lad never stood a chance. You take a slow breath and realize modern dating apps have nothing on this kind of slow burn mystery. This was the opposite of instant gratification. This was a long game. You send the card. You wait. You replay every detail in your head. Was it too much ambergris? Did I overdo the musk? Did I seal it right? Should I have used the monogrammed paper? Perfume makers fed this obsession. You'd walk into a shop like Penhaligon's and find little scent bottles marketed specifically for correspondence. Letter bouquet, violet whispers, tea rose secrets, designed to be subtle, slow-releasing, and let's be honest, stubborn. Once those molecules clung to the page, they were there for the long haul. And this brings you to the chemistry of it all. You wouldn't think the Victorians were dabbling in paper-based scent tech, but they sort of were. One common technique involved mixing essential oils with high-proof alcohol, then gently dabbing the mixture onto paper with a rabbit's foot or, yes, feathers. The alcohol evaporated, leaving the oil absorbed into the cellulose. Scratch and sniff before its time. Still, some missteps happened. Letters mailed during humid summers often arrived smelling nothing like intended. One poor woman in Essex tried sending an envelope scented with orange blossom and clove. By the time it reached her gentleman in Bristol, it reportedly smelled like overcooked ham. But that's the gamble, right? You take a risk. You send your scent. You hope it lingers. You hope he lingers. You glance down at the imaginary postcard again, the faded scent tugging at your imagination. Who was she? What did she want? And did the scent say it better than her words ever could? One mainstream fact: books like Floriography or The Language of Flowers sold by the thousands in the 1800s, often bound in velvet and gifted to debutantes. One quirky tidbit: some flirtatious types would send an unscented card, then a second, scented one the next day with no message, just perfume. That was the Victorian equivalent of a mysterious text at 2 a.m. And remember, historians still argue whether the practice of scent communication was mostly personal innovation or passed down in formal etiquette circles. Maybe both. Maybe your great-aunt really did have a scent for every social occasion, and maybe her niece just wanted to smell like danger and lilac. Outside, a gas lamp flickers in the imagined street. The scent lingers in your mind even after the postcard's set down. There's a trace of a stranger, a code, a dare. Your hand hesitates just above the mailbox slot. It's evening, and the postman's last collection is moments away. The envelope in your hand smells faintly of lavender and something warmer, like tonka bean or a memory. You glance around to make sure no one's watching, then slip it through. The moment it disappears into the dark iron box, your stomach flips. It's out of your hands now, literally. You're not the only one handling scented correspondence, of course. No, this perfumed postcard now enters the second act of its journey, where the backstage players take center stage. Welcome to the Victorian post office. If you think today's mail workers have stories, imagine the gossip flying around when letters reeked of tuberose or scandal. Victorian postmen and sorters weren't just passive conduits. They were unintentional witnesses to society's more fragrant secrets. As the envelope makes its way through the sorting station, one postal clerk lifts an eyebrow. Another leans in. You picture him, handlebar mustache, ink-stained fingers, half a sandwich on his desk. He gives the envelope a cautious sniff and mutters, "Jasmine again. Must be Miss Eliza. Third time this week." Yes, postal workers developed reputations for recognizing not just handwriting, but perfume signatures. Some postmen claimed they could tell who a letter was from just by its smell. No address label needed. A romantic notion, if slightly creepy. But back then, scent was as good as a calling card. One mainstream fact: the Royal Mail handled over 1.3 billion letters annually by the end of the 19th century. That's a staggering number of paper flirtations, and a whole lot of olfactory data for nosy workers. Of course, official policy frowned upon this kind of sniff and gossip behavior. The British Post Office had strict rules against tampering or even unnecessarily handling private mail. But that didn't stop the occasional romantic clerk from making mental notes. Or keeping favorites. There's one particularly juicy and likely apocryphal tale from a Manchester sorting station. A young postman allegedly intercepted a scented letter addressed to a rival suitor. Overcome with jealousy, he was smitten with the same sender. He redirected the letter to himself. The woman, puzzled by the lack of reply, sent another. This time, she switched perfumes. Realizing the man she loved never received her messages, she confronted the post office. Scandal erupted. The story ends with the rogue postman dismissed and the couple eloping to Brighton. A storybook ending with just the faintest whiff of theft. You smile. What's a little postal fraud in the name of love? But beyond romantic meddling, the scented letters sparked real concerns. Some older, more conservative clerks grumbled that perfume interfered with their work, especially when sorting in bulk. "I can't tell rose from receipt ink," one anonymous letter to the editor claimed. Others worried that overly strong perfumes might conceal poison. Yes, really. You pause. That escalated quickly. But the Victorian press occasionally fanned the flames of paranoia. In 1888, a small scandal arose when a woman in Bath fainted upon receiving a card soaked in oriental musk. Doctors chalked it up to overexcitement, but sensationalist papers spun stories of chemical warfare disguised as flirtation. Historians still argue whether any of these incidents were real or simply moral panic wrapped in rosewater. Some even suggest that accusations of dangerously perfumed letters were ways to police women's agency. Just another attempt to shame them for expressing affection. Still, the idea of perfume as distraction persisted. That, and the occasional allergic reaction. Imagine opening your post and sneezing for 20 minutes because someone decided patchouli was seductive. But you're getting off track. Let's bring it back to the moment your letter hits the local sorting hub. Maybe it's being placed into a small canvas sack marked to Shropshire. Maybe the clerk handling it, quiet, balding, wears fingerless gloves, gives it a second glance. Maybe he smiles, just a little. He's seen enough to know what this is. A girl from Camden, sending her hopes and courage, sealed in violet water and pressed petals, off to someone who may or may not deserve it. He places it gently in the outgoing bin, like it's made of sugar glass. Not all letters are so tender, though. Some were jokes, rude notes with exaggerated, cloying perfume sent anonymously. A practical joke among bored students or spiteful debutantes. A stinker, they called it, quite literally. One quirky tidbit: a London prankster in 1882 reportedly sent out 20 identical postcards saturated with eau de cologne to unsuspecting businessmen, each reading, "You smell as sweet as your ambition." Harmless, but weirdly flattering. Still, most letters were genuine, risky, vulnerable. The scent was the heartbeat of the page, turned paper into memory. Imagine receiving a card scented with the perfume of someone you danced with 3 nights ago. Your hand trembles as you read, but it's not the words that hit you first. It's the recognition. Her. You think, it's her. Perfume was time travel before time travel. And for people starved of touch, voice, and presence, it was the closest thing to being near someone. But here's a detail often overlooked. The postal route itself altered the scent. Train journeys, humidity, proximity to other letters. It all worked to either preserve or mutate the original fragrance. A hint of bergamot might vanish. A woody note might intensify. By the time it arrived, the message might be distorted. Which makes you wonder, how many misunderstandings were born because the wrong scent got through? Historians still debate the scale of this problem. Some argue most perfume was too faint to confuse. Others suggest entire courtships collapsed because a letter lost its intended signal en route. You lean closer to the imagined desk again, listening to the hush that follows old paper. The kind of hush filled with possibilities. The envelope might still be traveling, somewhere across the countryside. Maybe it will arrive tomorrow. Maybe it already has. And maybe, just maybe, it smells exactly like you hoped. You're in your room again. Gaslight flickers. Your writing desk is tidied just enough to seem effortless, and you've finally kicked off those pinching boots. In your lap is a blank card. The scent you chose, lavender with the tiniest trace of neroli, floats lazily from the little crystal vial beside you. Now, you're not just writing a letter. You're deploying an operation. This is Flirtation, Victorian Girl Boss Edition. You're a young woman in 1877, and you're playing the only game in town where you don't get to move first, speak first, or even leave your name outright. But here's the twist. You do get to scent the battlefield. Your grandmother would be appalled, probably. A lady never lowers herself, she always said, sipping her tepid tea. But you're not lowering, you're strategizing. There's a certain gentleman you danced with at the Harrington supper last Thursday. He laughed at your joke. He smelled faintly of shaving soap and new books. His hand lingered just half a second too long when he said goodbye. You're hooked, and now you're wondering, would he recognize your scent if it arrived in his post? This was the art of Victorian flirtation. Quiet, coded, and intensely calculated. You couldn't just say, "I like you." That would be vulgar. But a card that said, "Thank you for a lovely evening," sealed with a press of heliotrope-scented stationery? Oh, darling, that said everything. Women, especially unmarried ones, had to master the art of saying everything without saying anything. Flirting was often the only area of life where they could express agency. Even if it had to be wrapped in lace, dipped in lilac water, and delivered with a curtsy. One mainstream fact: unmarried Victorian women were expected to maintain an image of gentle restraint. A lady who initiated conversation too boldly might be labeled forward or worse, ruined. But scent? That wasn't considered speech. It was just atmosphere. Convenient, isn't it? You lean closer, imagining a friend beside you. A confidant, maybe a cousin with an impish grin, watching as you carefully address the envelope. "You're going to use that one?" she teases. "Lavender's a bit old-fashioned, isn't it?" You roll your eyes. It's not the fashion you care about. It's the memory, because at the Harringtons, that scent was what you were wearing. He may not know your name, but if he's paying attention, he'll recognize the fragrance. Victorian flirtation didn't just rely on perfume. It relied on memory. Sensory triggers were everything. In an era before selfies, DM slides, or dramatic story likes, people relied on far more delicate cues. A handkerchief dropped. A shared book returned with a single daisy tucked inside. A signature perfume that followed you like a soft ghost. One quirky tidbit: some women were known to switch perfumes after every failed flirtation, as if deleting a dating app profile. Violet didn't work. Maybe verbena will do the trick. You chuckle, imagining rows of little glass bottles lined up on a vanity like miniature ex-boyfriends. And this was not just the domain of aristocrats. Middle-class girls participated in this olfactory courtship too. In fact, the affordability of postcards and mass-produced colognes meant that even shopkeepers' daughters could dabble in scented flirtation. A bottle of rosewater might cost just $1. A pack of embossed stationery? Even less. That meant one thing: accessibility. Flirting became democratized, even if society pretended otherwise. You dabbed the corner of your letter with a soft cloth, just as you practiced. Too much and the paper would stain. Too little and he'd never notice. There's an art to this. You've ruined plenty of envelopes to learn it. Now comes the signature. Not your name, certainly not. Maybe just initials. Or better yet, nothing at all. Let the perfume do the talking. After all, this isn't a proposal. It's just a gentle tap on the shoulder of his memory. But what if he doesn't reply? That's the risk, isn't it? That's what makes your heart race as you tuck the envelope under your blotter. This might be read and cherished. It might be sniffed and laughed at. Or, horrors, it might be shown to his friends. Historians still argue whether women truly had control in these exchanges or whether the illusion of control simply masked how vulnerable the whole thing was. But for now, in this moment, you feel powerful. You're playing by the rules, but you've learned how to bend them. Downstairs, the clock strikes 8. The air is warm tonight. A soft breeze rustles your curtain. Somewhere in the city, someone else is writing a letter, too. Maybe to you. maybe about you. You think of other girls like yourself, across town, across the country, staring at similar desks, debating whether to scent the page or play it safe. Some won't, some will, and some, like you, will go just bold enough to stir the air around someone's memory. One last glance. You slip the card into its envelope, seal it shut, and hold it briefly to your chest. He'll know. If he has a soul and a decent nose, he'll know. One mainstream fact: scented paper products became so popular in the late 19th century that companies began pre-perfuming their stationery for ladies who didn't want to dabble in oils themselves. One more quirky note: some women started tucking tiny dried herbs inside their envelopes as backup, just in case the perfume faded in transit. Like including a scented insurance policy. Your candle flickers lower. You yawn without meaning to. The letter sits ready, waiting to leave. You're nervous but giddy, because you did something bold. And you did it beautifully. Tomorrow you'll drop it in the post. And he might just fall in love with the air around the words. The envelope sits beside you like a co-conspirator. Sealed, scandalously scented, innocently worded. You're strangely proud of it. You hold it lightly between your fingers, then, just once, bring it to your nose. The scent is there. A little floral, a little citrus, just like you planned. And now you start noticing the other half of the equation, the materials. Because in this game of Victorian flirtation, it's not just the scent that speaks. It's how it's delivered. Welcome to the sensual world of stationery. Not the beige bulk packs you find at the back of office supply stores, mind you. No, this is Victorian England, where even paper flirts with you. Your writing desk holds options, all arranged with the precision of a chemist. Thick vellum sheets for serious correspondence, tinted cream for gentle civility, and the faint blush pink ones, the ones that almost look embarrassed, for, well, the kind of note you just sent. You run a finger across the surface of the paper, feeling its quiet resistance. High-quality stock was smooth but not slippery. It gave your words gravity. Now imagine being on the receiving end. The letter arrives. You tear open the envelope carefully, and before your eyes catch the ink, your fingers register the texture. Thick, soft, expensive, not necessarily, but deliberate. You're already being seduced before you've read a single syllable. And then the scent hits. Paper and perfume weren't just random pairings. They were curated. Certain textures absorbed oils better. Certain embossing patterns trapped fragrance in their raised curls. That little card you sent is practically an instrument, and you're the composer. One mainstream fact: stationery shops in major cities like London, Bath, and York offered full-service packages for ladies. You could choose the paper, scent, wax color, and even custom monograms. Yes, even if you weren't married. Now let's peek inside a Victorian writing box. It's a thing of beauty. Mahogany, inlaid with brass. Hinged compartments for sealing wax, stamps, vials of perfume, and fancy pens. A ribbon to hold your current paper in place. And, oh yes, a velvet-lined drawer that just happens to contain a miniature atomizer. Just in case. You open it with care. This isn't just a box. It's an arsenal of emotional expression. Remember how today's love lives are waged through texts, emojis, and poorly timed likes. Back then, you had scent, texture, and wax, which, if we're being honest, sounds more romantic than sending someone a skull emoji at 1 a.m. You glance again at the envelope. The seal is rose gold. Literally, a wax tinted with mica flakes to shimmer under gaslight. You chose it because it matched the ribbon in your hair. Will he notice? Probably not. Will his sister notice? Absolutely. Here's where it gets interesting. A lady's choice of stationery became a reflection of her personality. Lavender paper said soft-spoken and thoughtful. Pale green hinted at eccentricity or artistic flair. Cream, unembellished and unperfumed, dangerously close to boring, unless the ink was scandalously dark blue. People noticed. And if someone sent a letter on scented black-bordered morning paper, phew, that was either an existential crisis or high-drama flirtation in disguise. One quirky tidbit: some young women took to embossing their initials in secret spots on the card, like under the stamp flap. That way, if the recipient showed it off, no one else could guess who sent it. Sherlock Holmes would have adored these girls. You run your thumb along the corner of the envelope again, and you remember, the paper isn't just the vessel. It's part of the message. Flirtation by mail meant curating the whole experience. Even the handwriting mattered. You practice it sometimes. Color your loops, just enough flair to make the reader wonder if you learned it from a governess or from watching too many theater handbills. And as for ink, blue was fashionable. Purple was mysterious. Black was proper. Red? Red ink was considered wildly improper for a lady. Some etiquette guides even warned it was suggestive of poor breeding or theatrical affectation. Translation: use red if you want to be talked about. Historians still argue whether these stationary customs were codified across the country or evolved independently through gossip and imitation. Either way, women knew. They always knew. And it wasn't just upper-class ladies, either. The Industrial Revolution made beautiful paper more accessible, and girls working in shops or factories could still afford a bottle of cheap rosewater and a box of pastel-tinted cards. It leveled the playing field just enough to be dangerous, which is why some households started regulating correspondence. Fathers would insist on seeing all outgoing mail. Mothers monitored who responded. Some girls began mailing their letters through friends or servants, unofficial mail smugglers. You sit up straighter, thinking about the sheer determination it took to participate in this strange dance. To craft a persona with nothing more than cardstock and cologne. To say something without saying it. To make sure your flirtation felt like a coincidence. And yet you managed. You sealed the letter. You scented it. You dropped it into the mouth of the red pillar box. The moment it left your fingers, the performance began. And you have to admit, it felt thrilling. One final detail floats into your mind. In some circles, particularly among artists and actors, scented letters evolved into full-on performance art. One aspiring playwright sent every woman he fancied a hand-painted card sprayed with a different cologne and signed only with a sketch of a fox. Mysterious, brooding, and very likely insufferable. Still, you'd have saved the card, wouldn't you? Your candle's nearly gone now. The air smells faintly of wax and roses. The envelope is out of your hands, but your imagination still clings to it. Winding through narrow streets, slipping through post office windows, gliding over polished desks. Wherever it goes next, it carries a piece of you. Pressed into paper, perfumed, and perilously polite. You wake the next morning to a ray of sunlight slicing across the floorboards. It smells faintly of dust, lavender, and possibility. Somewhere across the city or the countryside, if your gentleman stationed away, your letter is traveling. Floating through space and time, leaving a trail of barely their fragrance behind it. But what keeps that scent clinging to paper days, sometimes weeks, after you send it? This is where Victorian women got sneakily brilliant. Because in a world of corsets, calling cards, and constant surveillance, they weren't just playing the flirtation game. They were mastering scent technology. You think scratch and sniff was invented in the 70s? Nope. Try 1874. Back then, scented paper was more than just a spritz and a prayer. Ladies and, increasingly, manufacturers relied on fixatives. These were ingredients designed to hold the fragrance in place, slowing its evaporation. Like glue for perfume, ambergris, civet, and musk were popular, if ethically questionable, natural fixatives. But since not everyone had access to whale barf and glandular cat goo, most people relied on a simpler trio: orris root, tincture of benzoin, and good old-fashioned alcohol. One mainstream fact: Victorian perfume recipes often included orris root, a powder made from iris bulbs, to bind scent molecules to paper or fabric. It gave a slightly powdery scent on its own and extended the life of whatever it was paired with. So let's say you're prepping your stationery for maximum staying power. You begin by dabbing a little scented alcohol mixture, rosewater and bergamot, perhaps, onto a piece of tissue. Then you press it lightly against the back of your card, let it dry, and seal it in an envelope immediately. No drafts, no light. Let the scent settle like dew on a petal. And yes, some women went much further. You've probably heard of scent sachets for drawers. But Victorian women weaponized those sachets for correspondence, too. They'd store blank stationery in scented silk pouches for days or even weeks, allowing the paper to absorb a soft, even aroma without staining. Imagine, your future letter is pre-soaked in flirtation before you even pick up a pen. One quirky tidbit: a few elite ladies reportedly used sealed glass domes filled with scented herbs to infuse their paper. It looked like a cloche over a cake stand, but held passion and lavender instead of pastries. You picture it now. A writing table by the window, with a dome of rose petals and myrtle sitting like a sleeping perfume genie. Dramatic? Of course. But effective? Absolutely. Now, this doesn't mean everything smelled divine. Some women got it wrong. Overpowering musk, clashing florals, heavy gardenia on humid days. It could go from seductive to suffocating faster than you could say, "Oh, no thank you." And because people were people, trends emerged. Certain scents became too popular. By the 1880s, so many girls were scenting their calling cards with violet that satirical magazines started mocking the lavender hordes. Fashionable girls switched to mignonette, lemon verbena, or even unconventional choices like vetiver to stand out. Historians still argue whether these shifts in scent trends were driven by availability, regional preference, or just the same mysterious social osmosis that makes everyone wear the same lipstick one month and throw it away the next. And there was always a danger in standing out too far. Some perfumes, especially those with spicy or musky notes, bordered on scandalous. They hinted at sensuality, boldness, foreignness. Oriental scents, as they were exotically and problematically branded, could imply a woman was daring or dangerous. You imagine a young woman, let's call her Clara, leaning too far into a tuberose-heavy cologne she found in a little Soho shop. She writes a letter to a friend's older brother. It smells expensive, and sharp, and just slightly wrong. He opens it and frowns. He doesn't read it twice. Poor Clara switches to rosewater next time. Still, others leaned into the edge. A widow might use sandalwood and clove. Mature, warm, mysterious. A bohemian artist might risk using patchouli or amber resin. And the bravest? They mixed their own. You toy with the idea now. A secret recipe. Something no one else wears. Your own olfactory signature. Equal parts wild mint and crushed petals and whatever memory you want to bottle. Scent wasn't just a message. It was a fingerprint. And once someone associated a smell with you, it could become your ghost. Long after a letter was tucked into a drawer, or a flirtation had cooled, a whiff of your perfume could undo someone. One mainstream fact: some chemists and stationers began marketing long-lasting scent inks in the 1880s. An ink that held a light fragrance after drying. Though mostly a novelty, they were reportedly used by poets, dramatists, and the extremely bored. One delightfully strange detail: there was a brief fad for scented postage stamps. Some women would carefully dab the stamp itself with perfume, believing the addressee would instinctively sniff it as they licked. Unsanitary? Sure. Subtle psychological warfare? Definitely. But the technique of scenting letters wasn't purely romantic. Mothers sent comforting lavender-scented letters to sons abroad. Sisters mailed jasmine-soaked notes to far-off brides. Even business cards occasionally carried the faintest trace of cologne, meant to suggest good taste and clean linen. You stretch, the idea lingering, so much emotion packed into invisible molecules. It makes you wonder what modern messages would say if they carried our scent. Would your emails reek of stress and iced coffee? Would your texts smell like dry shampoo and sarcasm? Back in the past, though, the letter is still traveling, still holding its scent. You imagine someone picking it up from a silver tray, unsealing the flap and pausing, because there it is. The air shifts, their face changes, memory stirs. They don't even need to read it to know it's from you. He holds the letter between his fingers longer than necessary, doesn't open it. Not yet. He brings it to his nose first. There it is, that faint ribbon of scent winding upward. Lavender, yes, but something else. Maybe orange flower? Maybe just the way the paper aged in transit? He tilts his head slightly, as if the act of smelling demands full concentration. And in that moment, before a single word is read, you're already in his mind. This is the payoff. The gamble. The moment every Victorian flirt with a bottle of perfume and a stamp dreams of. Not just being noticed, but being remembered. The scent hits his memory before anything else. Before your handwriting, before your carefully chosen paper, before the first "dear" or the final signature. He's already imagining you again. The way you laughed at his joke. The lavender water you dabbed behind your ear. The way your eyes dropped when you handed back his glove. Let's face it, if you're relying on words alone in this era, you're playing the game on hard mode. Because here's the truth, Victorian letters were often short, polite, cautious, packed with niceties and formalities. The real conversation often happened between the lines. In the curve of the G, in the loop of the Y, in the placement of your signature, in the whisper of fragrance on the page. And now that he's got your letter, he's reading it like a detective. One mainstream fact: Victorian etiquette dictated that a lady's letter to a gentleman, especially one not related by family, must remain modest, brief, and without ornament. But as you know, that's where the scent came in. So he flips open the envelope, unfolds the card with careful fingers. His eyes scan the ink, and it's polite as expected. Maybe just a thank you, maybe a reference to the last evening at the Harringtons. You've given him nothing he can repeat aloud, but everything he needs to think about. And the scent? Still there, like punctuation. Now, this is where his imagination kicks in. If he's clever or romantically inclined, he's reading beyond the words. He's matching them to your voice, to your expression, to the half-second pause before you looked away. That's what makes the letter powerful. Not the text, but the scented memory wrapped around it. He sets the card down and sighs. He may not reply tonight, or even tomorrow, but he'll reread it. He'll pick it up again later when he's alone, probably in bed, candle flickering, and inhale once more, just to see if he imagined it. You, on the other hand, are a mess of nerves, because this part, the waiting, it's unbearable. You sip tea but can't taste it. Reread the letter you sent from memory at least a dozen times. What if it arrived during a rainstorm and the scent washed out? What if the postman left it in a basket under something smelly? What if he didn't get it? And worse, what if he did and just didn't care? Victorian women waited a lot. For mail, for suitors, for marriage proposals, for social permission to do anything beyond embroidery and fainting. But waiting for a scented reply, that was next-level psychological warfare. And then one day it arrives. A return envelope, slightly thicker paper, pale gray, masculine but elegant. You hold it to your nose. Nothing. But wait, no. There's a trace of something. Sandalwood? Or cedar? Or maybe it's just his cologne absorbed by the page as he wrote. Either way, your heart does a little pirouette. You sit at your desk, careful fingers breaking the wax seal. Inside, politeness, formality, more restraint than you'd like. But underneath the surface, you spot it. A sentence that echoes something you said. A phrase that feels like an inside joke. And yes, he remembered your scent. He says something like, "Your note was most memorable." That's it. That's the green light. That's the Victorian equivalent of, "I can't stop thinking about you." One quirky tidbit: some gentlemen, especially the more theatrical ones, would respond to scented letters by pressing the reply with dried herbs. Mint for freshness. Thyme for courage. One even used cinnamon bark, though the recipient complained her fingers smelled like breakfast for days. Some bolder women saved these scented replies under pillows or in corset drawers, letting the scent soak into their lives. It wasn't uncommon to find young women with entire bundles of old letters tied with ribbon. Not for rereading, but for resmelling. Historians still argue whether this epistolary exchange was more psychological than romantic, whether the perfume was seduction or self-expression. But either way, once both parties engaged in the scent game, it became a courtship. Your friends ask, "Have you heard from him?" And you pretend to be bored as you say, "Oh, just a small note." Meanwhile, you've read it 5 times. You've memorized the curve of the R in your name. More importantly, you remember the scent that clung to the envelope. You imagine a future. The two of you, old and married, sitting by a fireplace. He leans over, smells your wrist, and murmurs, "Lavender and orange blossom, just like your first letter." Ridiculous? Sure. But that's how it starts. One mainstream fact: some elite households kept personal scent diaries. Little ledgers recording which perfumes were worn or used for correspondence on which dates. Kind of like a fragrance almanac. And here's one more delightfully absurd detail. A brief fashion existed for scented gloves. That's right. Ladies would dab perfume into the fingers of their gloves. So when they handed a letter to a footman or touched the envelope, the scent transferred like a secret. You lean back, finally breathing deeply. The game is afoot. You sent your message. He replied. You have a scent-based courtship blooming right under the noses of society. It smells like success. You're in your room again, and your cheeks are warm. Not from the fire, but from rereading his letter for the 6th time. There's no real declaration, no obvious flirtation, and yet, he remembered the scent. That small sentence, "Your note was most memorable," is circling your thoughts like a shy bird refusing to land, and suddenly it clicks. You need to reply. Not just because etiquette suggests it, but because this is now a conversation, not in ink exactly, but in fragrance. A slow, invisible dialogue. So you reach for your writing box again and begin planning your reply. And this time you want it to escalate. Not too much, just a nudge. You dab your finger in a new scent. Narrowly this time, edged with something slightly spicy. You're not sending a thank you card. You're sending a memory trigger. Because the goal now: make sure he smells something 3 days from now that yanks you into his thoughts like a fishhook. Let's take a step back. This scent exchange you're caught in? It wasn't rare. In fact, it had a name. Victorians often called it silent correspondence. Letters that spoke in mood, gesture, and scent rather than declarations or daring words. Women and men developed entire rhythms of communication that never technically broke etiquette, but still pulsed with emotion. One mainstream fact: books like The Art of Letter Writing for Ladies advised women on tone, paper choice, and even scent, but never explicitly told them how to flirt. That was left between the lines. And so, naturally, people got creative. You've probably heard of floral dictionaries, right? But some savvy flirts created their own scent alphabets, each perfume or blend representing a different phrase or feeling. Patchouli for longing, sweet pea for hope, myrrh for sorrow. It was like Morse code for the romantically repressed. You imagine one woman, let's call her Eleanor, writing a weekly letter to a man whose parents forbid their courtship. They couldn't write anything too emotional, but they'd prearranged a scent system. Every Tuesday, she'd send a card perfumed with lilac if she was safe and waiting, sandalwood if something was wrong, jasmine if she'd found a way for them to meet. And he kept the empty envelopes in a drawer, reading them not with his eyes, but with his nose. One quirky tidbit: a few bold couples created entire fragrance poems. First line, lavender. Second, cedar. Third, lemon verbena. Each sent a stanza, each envelope a line. Historians still argue whether these scent codes were widespread or rare acts of rebellion among the sentimental elite. But anecdotal evidence and preserved letters hint that this quiet revolution of fragrance communication happened more often than people think. And it wasn't just lovers. Sisters wrote to each other using scent as comfort. A mother sending her son off to boarding school might perfume the tissue tucked into his trunk. A widow might write to a friend on pale blue paper, lightly scented with hyacinth, offering wordless solidarity. But you're back to plotting. You're deciding whether to stay with the same scent or try something new. Too much variety might seem careless, but keeping the same perfume? That could imply dependability, or worse, predictability. You compromise. Same base note, lavender, but now with a trace of nutmeg and orange peel. Subtle, interesting, just enough to suggest that you're not playing on repeat. You're improvising. You pause, glance out the window. What if he replies again? What if this becomes a tradition? You smile without realizing it. And this is when you discover something thrilling. You are shaping how he imagines you. Before he knows your middle name or how you like your tea, he associates you with this exact smell. In his mind, you aren't just a face or a voice, you're an atmosphere. That's power. And you're not alone in realizing it. A few well-documented Victorian women built their entire public personas around perfume. One example, a lady author from Yorkshire reportedly scented every book she signed with a custom rose musk blend. Her readers claimed they could identify her letters before opening them, and more than one young suitor allegedly claimed to fall in love with just the smell of her pages. There's also the case of Isadora Finchley, a painter who began adding faint hints of bergamot and mint to the backs of her canvases. "So the room remembers me," she once said in a rare interview. Were these women eccentric? Maybe. But in a world where a woman's voice was often ignored in public, her scent could haunt a space long after she'd left it. One mainstream fact: by 1890, British perfumeries offered pre-scented letter sachets to slide into envelopes, a sort of Victorian potpourri packet to ensure a longer-lasting impression. And here's a strange, almost absurd aside. There were even scented calling cards, tiny rectangles of embossed cardstock, slipped onto silver trays during social visits. Many women began scenting them lightly with their chosen fragrance, a soft olfactory handshake. "I was here," the scent whispered, "and I was unforgettable. You finished your note now. It's more personal than the last. Just a few sentences longer, a little warmer. You've asked a question this time, something open-ended, something that invites response. And you've chosen a wax seal shaped like a sprig of lavender. Not subtle, but not obvious either. As you slip the letter into the envelope, you do something new. A final gesture. You hold it briefly to your neck before sealing it. Let your skin leave a trace. Let the warmth of you cling to the page. Because now you want him to miss you, not just the way you write, but the way you smell when you're gone. The reply takes longer this time. You try not to notice. You busy yourself, embroidering initials into napkins no one will ever look at closely, helping your mother rearrange tea tins, even dusting the baseboards like a Victorian Cinderella in soft mourning. But every footstep near the front door, you flinch. Every letter tray creak, your heart pirouettes. And then, finally, a thick envelope, cream paper, slightly smudged at the corner, like he hesitated before sealing it. Your fingers tremble, not from nerves exactly, but from that strange energy that builds when scent and emotion and imagination swirl in the same moment. You lift it to your face and, oh, he's changed something. Gone is the faint, crisp sandalwood of last time. Now there's something deeper, richer. Vetiver? A hint of tobacco and lemon peel? It smells like a library with a fireplace and just a touch of danger. The note inside, still polite, but undeniably warmer. Your letter was, and here you reread it to be sure, a breath of something familiar and entirely new. He's playing now. He's writing in scent. You realize it's become a game with no name. And like all the best games, it has rules but no referee. You're no longer just exchanging letters. You're building atmosphere. Scent isn't just a novelty anymore. It's become your language. And this is how a Victorian flirtation deepened. When the exchange turned from symbolic to emotional. When the smell wasn't just pleasant but recognizable. Personal. When it stopped being a layer of performance and became something truer, like wearing your own name. You think about this as you hold the envelope near the candle's flame to read in the soft flicker. You even reread it upside down, as if it might hide something in its shadows. But what you're really doing is breathing in, memorizing, associating him with this scent. One mainstream fact: studies even now suggest scent is deeply tied to memory, more than sight or sound. Victorian romantics didn't need neuroscience to figure that out. They simply noticed how a whiff of perfume could resurrect a person entirely. And now, so have you. You go to your drawer and pull out his first letter, the one with the cedar undertone. You hold it beside this new one. The contrast is stark. Softer to bolder, hesitation to confidence. He's unfolding before you. You glance at your perfume vials and realize you have a decision to make. Do you match his shift in tone? Deepen your scent profile too? Move from lavender to something darker, bolder? Or do you stay soft, keep your position in the dance? Let him move first. You pick up the tiny vial of violet and clove. And used until now. This could be the letter that says, I know we're past small talk. This could be your version of, I'm not playing anymore. But before you dip the pen, you pause. This moment, right here, this is where flirtation teeters toward intimacy. Scent wasn't just flirtation, after all. It was trust. To let someone know how you smell, to let them learn it, memorize it, associate it with you, that was intimacy in disguise. In a society where you couldn't touch a man's arm without raising eyebrows, letting him inhale a letter you pressed to your skin, that was physicality by proxy. One quirky tidbit: in rare cases, women enclosed a pressed flower or swatch of perfumed ribbon with their notes. Not to be showy, but to create permanence. Now you'll never forget how I smelled, the enclosed token whispered. And once received, those tiny scented relics often became secret treasures, hidden behind books, between mattress seams, in jacket pockets. Not shown, just held. You imagine your gentleman, let's call him Thomas, doing just that, folding the envelope back with surprising care, tucking it behind a drawer panel, or maybe pressing it inside the back of a worn volume of poetry he pretends not to like. Historians still argue whether men of the era took these correspondences as seriously as women. Some scholars say it was all amusement. Others point to surviving letters, creased, handled, even kissed, as proof that men did cherish these scented exchanges. Maybe not all, but enough to matter. And you're Thomas? The one who changed his scent. He's definitely paying attention. So, you write. Your tone is warmer. Not effusive, never that. But there's ease in it now. A soft humor. A reference to something only the two of you would understand. And then, after you seal the envelope, you reach for the violet clove blend and, for the first time, you scent the inside of the flap. It feels oddly intimate, like whispering. The scent won't reach anyone but him. Not the footman, not the mail clerk. Just him. When he opens the flap, that first inhale will be you directly. Not the packaging. Not the preamble. Just the essence of you waiting. And the rest? Well, you let it fade. Because scent, like flirtation, is more powerful when it lingers faintly, like a half-remembered song. One final flourish. You sign the letter with a small drawing. A sprig of violet inked just beside your initials. Not a flourish of art. Just a cue. So when he picks it up weeks from now and forgets the words, he'll still see the violet. Still smell the clove. Still feel, somewhere in his chest, the you that wrote it. Because that's what scent does. It makes you linger long after you're gone. The weather's turning now. You can feel it in your bones and your letters. Late autumn in Victorian England smells like damp wool, coal smoke, and stewed apples. But for you, it also smells like whatever cologne clings to the newest envelope in your hand. His scent has changed again, evolved. Now there's leather in it, something dry, confident. And the note inside? It's shorter, but bolder. He signs it with only his first name, Thomas. No more sincerely, no more with kind regards, just Thomas. You sit with that for a long time. Fold the letter, unfold it, fold it again. And what's strange is, you feel as though you know this man. Not just the way he writes, but the way he chooses to smell. It's been 4 letters now. For fragrances, for layers of memory. This isn't correspondence anymore. This is sensory storytelling. And here's the astonishing truth. The two of you are crafting a narrative through perfume. One mainstream fact: the Victorians believed strongly in moral olfaction. The idea that good people simply smelled better. It wasn't just hygiene, it was character. A refined man was expected to wear a subtle cologne, just as a refined woman wore delicate perfume. Anything too strong? Indelicate. Overdone. Possibly foreign. Possibly French. Quel horreur. So when Thomas deepens his scent profile, from woods to spice, you read it the way others read tone of voice. And you're not alone. Many Victorian women, especially those who read serialized novels, became skilled at interpreting character through scent, both real and imagined. They describe fictional men as smelling of integrity, or the type to wear lavender water, but unconvincingly. You think back to the first night you met Thomas. That crisp hint of shaving soap. A scent so faint you weren't even sure you noticed it. But now his cologne arrives before his letters do. You find yourself opening the mail tray and smelling each envelope like a detective searching for clues. One quirky tidbit: women who worked as governesses, often isolated, often lonely, sometimes wore their suitor's cologne as a comfort. A dab on the handkerchief, a mist on the lining of their gloves, a way to conjure presence from absence. You'd never admit it aloud, but yesterday you uncorked the vial of scent he used in his second letter. Just to remember. It's half science, half sorcery. You can almost see his shadow on the wall when the smell unfurls. Now, as you begin your reply, you sense something shifting. This isn't flirtation anymore. Not entirely. It's courtship. Slow, perfumed courtship conducted through paper and air. And with courtship comes questions. What does he want? Is he serious? Is this serious? You glance over your past letters, the dried flowers, the drawings. It's more than a pastime now. It's an archive of intention. Victorian etiquette would frown on you replying again so soon. But you're past etiquette now, aren't you? You reach for the bottle of Rose Absolute, the one you've saved for something. You dab it sparingly. Not the whole letter. Just a single dot on the back flap, like a kiss you'd never dare place in real life. Historians still argue whether perfumed letters were emotional theater or honest attempts at intimacy. But that assumes theater can't be honest. And your letters? They've become your most authentic self. Because here's the thing, in person you might not say these things. You might hesitate, stammer, look away. But on paper, with scent as your language, you are fearless. And you suspect he knows it. You write the letter more freely now. A bit of teasing. A reference to something you both observed last time. Mrs. Harrington's dreadful parsnip pudding. A line that could be read innocently, or as an invitation. You sign it not with initials, not with flourish, but simply, yours. Then wait. The waiting is quieter now. Less frantic. More like a hum in your blood. You've built something real, scent by scent, word by word. And in the quiet, you remember stories. One about a woman who fell in love with a man she never met, just through perfumed letters exchanged via a cousin. When they finally met, he claimed he recognized her by scent alone. Romantic or delusional? Hard to say, but she married him. Another story, this one darker. A young woman whose perfumed letters were intercepted by a jealous sister. The sister began copying her fragrance, confusing the suitor. In the end, he married the wrong girl, and neither sister spoke again. Scent was powerful and dangerous. You smile. You're not in danger. You're just drifting toward something. A man who signs only his first name now. A man who changes his cologne like turning the page of a story. One mainstream fact: perfume advertisements of the 1890s began marketing directly to emotions, where what makes him remember. Fragrance was no longer just about cleanliness. It was identity, intention, and memory rolled into a single note. And what is your intention? You're not sure yet, but you do know this. The moment he opens your next letter, the rose will hit him like a question. Gentle, warm, but clear. Do you see me now? Can you smell the answer? The reply arrives 3 days later. You don't even pretend to wait. No half-finished embroidery. No slow meander to the parlor where the letter tray waits. You're at the door before the servant even knocks. And when your fingers touch the envelope, something's different. It smells heavier, still warm somehow, as if it hadn't been posted, but hand-delivered. And there's something floral now, rich, honeyed, unfamiliar. Not rose, not lavender. You tilt your head, confused. Then you get it. It's mimosa, soft, yellow, almost powdery. A flower that blooms in winter, when nothing else dares. It's delicate and defiant all at once. And inside the envelope, just one page, written in his usual practiced hand. I find myself waiting for your letters now. Not because of the words, though I reread them, but because each time I open one, feels like you're closer. Yours, Thomas. You exhale and don't realize you were holding your breath. The mimosa wasn't random. You mentioned it once, didn't you? Offhand, in a letter last month. Something about how it blooms like a surprise in winter. A flower with bad timing and no regrets. He remembered. He used it. And just like that, you're in new territory. This is no longer just a flirtation. This is recognition. This is knowing. You're building a sensory world that belongs only to the two of you, and it smells like something blooming where it shouldn't. One mainstream fact: in Victorian florography, the language of flowers, mimosa symbolized sensitivity, memory, and hidden affection. It wasn't used casually. To include it in a note meant the writer wasn't just being poetic. He was being honest. You tuck the letter away, but not into your drawer. No, you press it into a small, velvet-covered book where you hide your best things. You don't need to reread the words again tonight. You'll remember them every time you catch the faint scent of mimosa in your hair or your scarf. This is how it happens. Not in declarations, but in slow accumulation. A whisper of scent, a repeated word, a change in the closing salutation. And you realize you've never actually spoken to him. Not really. Not for more than a few minutes at social events. Yet you know the curve of his handwriting, the rhythm of his scent, the way he closes his O with a tiny inward loop. Is this love, or just longing finely sharpened by distance? Historians still argue whether epistolary relationships were sustainable or doomed to collapse under the weight of reality. But the Victorians didn't always care. For many, the imagined relationship felt truer than any tea-room conversation. Letters were curated, scented versions of the self. The best self. The self someone could fall in love with. You don't write back right away. This time you wait. 3 days. Then 5. You know the pattern now. You know the tension it creates. You're not punishing, you're conducting. And while you wait, you do something quietly outrageous. You create your own perfume blend. Takes patience. You visit a discreet apothecary. Ask vague questions. Return with vials labeled orris, orange flower, and amber. You spend an afternoon blending them with surgical care, testing them on scraps of ribbon, writing notes in the margins of your address book like a chemist or a witch. Eventually, you land on it. A warm, almost invisible scent. Not floral, not sweet, just familiar. Like sun-warmed skin, like pages turned in a quiet room. Like you name it nothing. You don't need to, it just is. And when the next letter is ready, you don't dab this scent on top. You press the paper into a silk sachet and leave it there overnight. Let it steep. Let the perfume become the letter. You don't even use sealing wax this time. You close the envelope with a violet ribbon and trust that the message is clear. The scent, the paper, the absence of flourish. It all adds up. You don't even write much. I remembered the mimosa. This one smells like me. Yours, you know who. One quirky tidbit. Some Victorian women didn't sign their names at all in later letters, once the exchange had become familiar. Instead, they'd mark the letter with a pressed fingerprint or a lip print in invisible clove oil, visible only under warmth. Whispers sealed in chemistry. And as for the letters themselves, they rarely got thrown away. Many women, and men, kept entire bundles wrapped in lace, tucked behind bookshelves, or hidden in writing desks. Some perfumed, some not, but all saturated with time and feeling. You look around your room and realize you're doing the same. You've created a ritual. Each letter has its place. Each bottle of scent its memory. You're not just exchanging paper. You're writing your history in fragrance. One mainstream fact: Queen Victoria herself was known to perfume letters to her children and grandchildren, especially during periods of travel or mourning. The scent, she believed, was a kind of presence. You think of that as you press your fingers over the envelope one last time. Imagine him opening it, breathing it in, feeling something stir. Not dramatic, not dangerous, just real. You whisper aloud to no one, "Let him know me." And for the first time, you think he does. The days after sending that letter are strangely quiet. Not just from the post, but inside your head. There's no anxiety, no clock watching. It's as if by finally sending your own scent, your real scent, you've moved into some new state of calm. You've shown your hand. Not dramatically, not boldly, but truthfully. And now you wait for someone to meet you there. When the envelope comes, 5 days later, you don't open it right away. You sit with it. Let it warm in your palm. Feel the weight of it. It's heavier than before. Slightly thicker paper. A ribbon tying it closed. No seal. No perfume you recognize at first. But something is there. Something alive. You lift it to your nose. Earth. Smoke. Rain on stone. And yes, mimosa again, faint and fading. He's blended it. You smile without realizing. You know what that means. He's trying to match you. You untie the ribbon slowly, carefully. Inside, not just a letter, but a second folded sheet. Handmade paper. Coarse, textured, slightly yellowed, and pressed into it, still soft, still holding scent, is a single perfect sprig of thyme. And this is bold, because thyme in the Victorian floral dictionary meant courage. And the note, written in a darker ink than usual, sparser, more direct. I've never done this before, not like this, not with scent and silence. But I've come to anticipate you, not just the words, the presence. And I would very much like to see you again, properly, without envelopes, without perfume, just you, Thomas. You close your eyes. Well, there it is, that particular drop in your stomach. Equal parts exhilaration and dread. You've won. And now you have to decide what winning means. One mainstream fact: during the 19th century, once a woman and man moved from epistolary flirtation to in-person courtship, it was expected that letter writing would slow or stop entirely. Letters were the lead-up, not the relationship. But you're not sure you want it to end. The scented letters, the layered meanings, the thrill of anticipation. It's become your language. In the real world, he might stammer. Or you might. The weather might be dreadful. His mother might hate your perfume. Who knows? But on paper, through perfume, you are effortless. Still, you read the letter again. He didn't demand. He invited. And that changes everything. Historians still argue whether these scented romances led to stronger marriages, or simply prolonged infatuation. Some say the sensory buildup created impossible expectations. Others suggest it created deeper intimacy. After all, to know someone by smell before you ever touch them, that's a closeness most people never reach. You decide you'll reply, not with an answer, but with a meeting. You write a short note. 3 lines. Saturday. The gardens at midday. I'll wear mimosa. You don't sign it. You scent the corner of the page with your own blend. Just enough. Then you press a sprig of fresh thyme, mirroring his, into the fold. The envelope is sealed with wax this time. Pale yellow. No emblem. Just a simple stamp of your thumb, warm and centered. You hand it to the footman yourself. Tell him not to delay. And when you close your door, you breathe. The strange, the calm that follows a decision. You thought you'd feel exposed, frightened, but instead you feel tethered, like some invisible thread has finally gone taut, leading you forward. One quirky tidbit: some Victorian women wore tiny scent pendants on chains around their necks. Inside, a drop of perfume soaked into fabric, designed to warm against the skin and release over time. Portable memory, a wearable mood. You consider it briefly, then shake your head. You don't need a pendant. You'll wear your memory on your sleeve. The morning of the meeting arrives quiet and golden. You dress without fuss. A simple dress. Gloves with a violet edge. And in your hair, a single sprig of mimosa tucked behind your ear. As you step outside, the world smells different. Sharper, cleaner, like the air has finally caught up to your thoughts. The walk to the gardens is quiet. You don't rush. But your heart is faster than your pace. Every scent on the wind seems louder now. Leather from a passing carriage. Bread from the bakery you always forget exists. The sharp tang of autumn leaves turning. And then you see him, across the path. He's holding nothing. No book, no umbrella, no excuse. Just standing there, hands at his sides, like he's exactly where he's supposed to be. He sees you. He smiles. And this part makes you laugh later. You both stop walking at the same time. Like an invisible current between you finally told your feet, that's far enough. There's no bow, no curtsy, just a shared inhale. He steps forward. Lavender, he says, then adds. And something else. You tilt your head. Orange flower and amber. He grins. You say nothing more. You don't need to. Because in that moment, in that shared space between breath and memory, you both understand. You've already known each other for weeks. Scent was just the doorway. Now you're ready to walk through. You meet again, of course. Not immediately, not every day, but often enough. Enough to turn a scented fantasy into a pattern, into something lived. And strangely, the letters don't stop. They just change. Now, instead of waiting breathlessly by the door for an envelope, you find them slipped into books he lends you, folded beneath the ribbon of a bouquet, tucked under your gloves after an afternoon stroll. Always short, always scented. Sometimes he writes nonsense. Saw a dog today, looked like a cloud. Thought of you. T. Sometimes he writes things that make your breath catch. Still can't decide if I remember you better by voice or by scent. One makes me listen. The other makes me feel. One mainstream fact. Even after the rise of the telephone, some lovers continue to write perfumed notes, because something about ink and fragrance, about something held and read and reread, simply couldn't be replaced. You start replying the same way. No more formality. No dear. No yours truly. Just fragments passed like secrets. Sometimes folded in his coat pocket when he's not looking. Sometimes left on the stone bench in the garden, knowing he'll find it when he returns. One simply reads, "You smell like something I dreamed once, but now you walk and talk, and forget to comb your hair." You both laugh more now, out loud, not just between the lines. And yet, the letters remain your private channel, your curated selves, a world only you two understand. You begin inventing your own scent language, just for fun. Jasmine means hurry. Cardamom means I'm annoyed. Cinnamon means I burned something again. Starts as a joke. But soon, you're slipping cinnamon oil onto the corner of a handkerchief, just to say without words, "Dinner is ruined. Come anyway." One quirky tidbit: in a few eccentric Victorian households, couples developed scent codes, not unlike semaphore or Morse, scented silk flags waved from balconies, or perfume sprayed near a specific window to signal a mood, a request, a warning. More rumor than routine, but the stories persist. You wouldn't go that far, but you do begin to experiment. One day, after an especially rainy morning, you send him a note soaked with the scent of petrichor. Yes, that specific smell of earth after rain. Just a note that says, "I missed the part where we didn't speak, but I'd never go back." And he sends one back that smells like firewood. "I miss it too, but I like this part better. Also, bring gloves next time. It's freezing." Historians still argue whether romantic relationships rooted in letters lasted longer. Some say the slowness deepened emotional bonds. Others claim it just prolonged fantasy. But you suspect that's the wrong question, because you're no longer writing for the relationship. You're writing inside it. The letters are now less about waiting and more about marking time, about keeping small moments from slipping through the cracks, about bottling a memory in ink and fragrance so you can return to it whenever the day feels too fast. You find one such letter in your coat pocket weeks later. You don't remember when he slipped it in. It smells faintly of bergamot and ink. The way you looked when the wind caught your scarf. You should have been painted. Or bottled. You read it slowly. Twice. You don't write back this time. Instead, you press a sprig of rosemary between the pages and leave the note on his windowsill. You're not sure he'll understand what rosemary means to you. Memory, longing, that ache of wanting time to slow. But he will smell it, and maybe he'll just know. You wonder if this will last. Not the feelings. Those feel sturdy. But the language. Will you still be dabbing perfume on the corner of receipts 10 years from now? Will you send him a handkerchief scented with lemon balm just to say, "We're out of milk"? You kind of hope so, because now scent is more than seduction. It's shorthand. It's story. It's you. One mainstream fact: in Victorian households, it wasn't uncommon for married couples to keep separate writing desks, even after decades together. A space not for formality, but for quiet thought. And yes, sometimes for scented notes slipped across the dinner table when the children weren't looking. So you keep your desk, you keep your ink, you keep your tiny vials of perfume, even the ones you rarely use. You never know when a moment will need bottling. And one evening, as you're tidying, you find a box. Inside it, every letter, every ribbon, every dried sprig and scented scrap. You didn't even realize you were collecting them. You hold them to your nose one by one. Some are faint now, faded, but others are still sharp, still familiar. They pull you back not just to the person you were, but to the feeling of wonder, of risk, of being known. You smile, and you leave the box open, because this isn't over. It's only just begun. The years don't arrive with fanfare. They slide in gently, disguised as repetition, as our usual bench and your side of the bed, as inside jokes about rosewater biscuits and that time the letter was delivered to your aunt by mistake. Scandalous, unforgettable. But through it all, the scent remains. It evolves, of course. Yours grows warmer, woodier, a hint of clove in winter, bergamot in spring. His settles into something steady. Leather, citrus, a whisper of smoke. You know it before he speaks. Sometimes before he enters the room. Sometimes even after he leaves. The letters thin, but never disappear. One tucked in your sewing basket. One slipped between the pages of a well-thumbed book. One folded into the pocket of a coat you haven't worn in months. Waiting patiently, as if trusting the timing. You don't always read them right away. Some you leave where you find them just to know they're there. A little scented secret holding space for something tender. The grown-up version of passing notes under a schoolroom desk. One mainstream fact: by the early 20th century, commercial perfumes began to standardize their formulas. Mass production diluted the once intensely personal nature of scent. But in private, people still crafted custom blends at home. Still kept their signature fragrances alive. You do the same. Your blend has a name now, at least between the two of you. He calls it the waiting scent, because it reminds him of the early days, of longing, of pauses between letters and looks. You wear it when you know he needs it, when he's anxious, when he's been gone too long, or when you simply want to say, "I remember," too, without speaking. He responds in kind. One day, he returns from a short trip, places a small envelope on your lap. Inside, a single petal, faintly dusted with mimosa. No words, no need. Historians still argue whether memory formed by scent is more vivid than memory formed by sight or sound. But you don't need research, you know. You live it. You remember that letter with the time, the one he sent just before your first proper meeting? You still have it. Still trace the faded imprint of his handwriting with your fingertips sometimes, especially on heavy mornings when the air feels too quiet. And yes, there have been heavier mornings. Not every letter brought joy. There was the one he sent from the hospital when his father was ill. It smelled of ink and nothing else. Like the perfume had drained from it, like grief pulled scent from the paper itself. And there was yours in return, sealed with rosemary and vetiver, meant to steady him. One quirky tidbit: during times of mourning, some Victorians believed perfume helped displace sadness from a room. Widows often wore violet or heliotrope, not for allure but for grounding. Fragrance as a kind of invisible brace. So when your own grief arrived, sudden and small, but sharp, you reached for lavender, pressed it into your pillowcase, your letters, your gloves. And he understood. He always did. Even now, your friends think it's strange. This ongoing ritual, this tiny language only the two of you still speak. They laugh when they catch you scenting a bookmark, raising an envelope to your nose before reading, leaving small, perfumed notes in the silverware drawer. You don't explain, because it's not for them. It's never been for anyone else. There's something sacred in your scented thread, a line that's never broken, only lengthened. And while the world modernizes, telephones, postcards, even the whirring threat of typewriters, you hold to the ritual. The ink, the paper, the waiting, the smelling. One mainstream fact: in her later years, Queen Victoria still sent perfumed letters to her grandchildren, often repeating the same fragrance, regardless of changing fashion. Historians interpret it as a mark of continuity, a way of saying, I am still here, this is still me. And isn't that what all these scented scraps are? Tiny declarations of self, of presence, of I am still here. So when your fingers are stiffer now, when writing takes a little longer, when you need help unstoppering the vial or pressing the seal, you still do it. Because he'll know. Because he'll notice. Because even now, he walks into a room and says, without fail, you changed your blend, or you wore the waiting scent, or most simply, I remember this one, and you smile, because the words don't matter as much anymore. The scent says it all. It's quiet now, not in a sad way, just in the way things soften when they've lasted. The perfume bottles are fewer, some empty, others faded, but you still reach for them, still open them now and then, not always to wear, sometimes just to remember. A single breath and you're back on that garden path. Or in your old bedroom, holding a letter close to the candlelight, or smelling mimosa before you even knew what it meant. You still write, not as often, sometimes only a line or two, a memory, a question, a joke. He still replies, one came last week, tucked into the folds of a newspaper. You found it by accident. Thought I'd forgotten the time, didn't you? Never. Tea. The note smelled faintly of cedar and cinnamon, a winter scent, warming. You keep it in the drawer beside the bed. The one with the other letters. The ones you never reread all at once. Only one at a time when the mood finds you. They're soft now, the scent lighter. Time erases the edges of perfume, but never the memory it carries. One mainstream fact: scientists today believe that scent memory is stored in a unique part of the brain, closely tied to emotion. That's why a single smell can resurrect a moment with terrifying clarity. Why you sometimes dream of violet when it rains. Why mimosa still makes your chest ache, gently. And the world outside? It's changed, yes. Letters have gone digital. Ink and paper have given way to keys and screens. But you still keep yours close. Because what you built, this long, scented conversation, isn't nostalgia. It's a living archive of longing, laughter, comfort, of two people writing each other into permanence. You remember your first perfume blend, how careful you were, how unsure, and now you make new ones all the time, for nieces, for neighbors, for the sheer pleasure of it. Your hands know the motion by heart, and sometimes, when you're alone, you still write to him, even if he's just downstairs, even if you'll hand it to him in person, because it's not the delivery that matters. It's the message behind the message, the breath inside the bottle, the idea that words can be touched, and scent can be felt, and love, when carefully steeped, can be stored on paper. One quirky tidbit: there's a museum in Paris that preserves scented love letters, carefully sealed in glass. Each one still smells faintly of its sender. Visitors describe the experience as time travel, or magic. You don't need a museum. You have a drawer, and a memory, and him. He still smiles when he catches the scent of bergamot on your scarf. Still tilts his head and says, you brought back the one from the third letter, didn't you? You did. Of course you did. Because some stories don't end. They just quiet. And this story, the one written in fragrance, folded in parchment, carried through years and heartbeats, is still unfolding. Even now, even in the hush, the air is gentler now, and you're breathing slower. Let the story settle. Let the rustle of parchment fade. Let the memory of mimosa and thyme and amber drift through the stillness like a final exhale. Imagine the drawer of old letters. This would worn smooth, its contents soft, fragile. Each folded page a quiet testament, not to grand gestures, but to small consistencies. The kind of care that accumulates, the kind that lasts. Your eyes might be heavy now. That's good. That means the story worked. The garden path you once walked is still there, somewhere, covered in fallen leaves, maybe, waiting for new steps. But the scent, that remains, tucked in the collar of an old coat, pressed between the pages of a forgotten book, lingering in the spaces where words once lived. You can let go of the timeline now. Let go of the characters. Just hold on to the feeling, that quiet connection, that delicate, invisible thread that said, I see you, I know you, I remember you. Let the last of it drift through the room like a slow ribbon of lavender and firewood. Feel the calm gather behind your eyes. Let your breath deepen. Slower, softer. You are safe. You are held. And somewhere, someone is still keeping your letters. Still breathing you in. Still smiling at a memory shaped like scent. Good night. Sleep well.